I'm going to call the meeting to order, please. If you can stand, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
It's different, so.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Commissioner Kirk, can I have a second? Commissioner McLaren, there's a moment of conversation. I do have one suggestion, which is the addition of a chairman's statement at the end, after the vote.
What?
Chairman's statement.
Thank you.
At the end of the vote. I have something I just want to read, that's all. Which would be replacing, we'd be moving to number 5, and adjournment would be moving to number 6.
Is there discussion?
There is.
I would just ask that any statements, final statements, not be those of personal opinion, but that they
Doesn't matter.
reflect board sentiment
Doesn't matter.
or votes. It does matter.
Right. All those in favor of amending the agenda as stated, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those against?
Nay.
One against, we pass this, thank you. Did you get that? Okay. I think Stephanie needs to sign. There goes Stephanie. So we will move on to public comment. Can we have the board? Is there anyone else here that has not signed up yet for public comment that would like to?
I haven't signed up, but
I need that back though, as soon as you do it.
yeah. Just need a pen.
Oops, we got one.
Thank you very much.
All right. Aaron Webster?
Chair, over at that table, please. So I just came today. I'm a 3-4 teacher at SA Academy, Sustainability Academy, but as a former public policy student, I chose to focus my capstone project in school on the importance of the street level actor in a top-down bureaucracy. Specifically, I looked at the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and the way our government handled the situation from a top-down approach. It didn't work, it wasn't effective or efficient. In order for public organizations to be effective in the public sector, we must look to the street level actor, the person who is relating to people who are benefiting directly from the organization. In a school, those are the students, and the teacher is working at that street level to help the students. I think the most important person is the one affecting those directly benefiting from the organization and not necessarily those at the top who may have a lot of answers, but they might be missing the mark on what questions to ask. I can tell you firsthand that at the Sustainability Academy, our interventionists know our students more than anyone and those across the district. And I think it's the teachers that know our students best and what our students need. More importantly, not just knowing their needs, but how to impact them. I urge the board to consider looking at a decentralized approach to budget cuts. In order to close the achievement gap, we need to look at those at the street level and understand what the students need. And I think this is critical to make sure all students can be successful. In 2009, there was a study put out by the New Teacher Project that looked at all factors affecting children: race, social class, background, and the teachers. In that 2009 study, it showed that the most important factor for students was the teacher standing in front of them every day, and that if organizations want to work to make their goals come out, then we need to look at the street level person. And if that's what the research shows has the biggest impact, I would just ask that we look at how we're going to narrow the achievement gap in ways that best serve the students. And I think it's really those people who have the direct contact with them that can help.
So just for full disclosure, I do work for the school district, but I'm here with my mom and taxpayer hat on. So it's just since I know a lot of you, it seems an important separation. Seemed like a shocking but shockingly effective red herring to add the ski and golf teams to the docket for removal alongside 9 classroom positions, but it worked though, as the sports really distracted from the hard facts of the actual academic losses to the classroom and interventionist positions. It was stunning to hear that mostly those were added for the desire to hear public opinion. It appears, however, that our youngest children just beginning their academic careers are not going to have that option to come give their voices, because my 5-year-old and my 8-year-old are not going to sit here and advocate for those classroom positions like the really articulate high schoolers were able to do last night about their teams. And it appears those decisions have already been made about the elementary positions, and I implore you to think about that gut reaction that the vast majority of the board articulated very well on the 16th, where you used words like appalled and extremely concerned to talk about the loss of those 9 positions and the impact on our earliest learners. I'm really troubled by that. I think you got to go with your gut here. There are no students who can come here to talk about the impact of large class sizes on their education. Their voices are too young, so here I am. So ultimately, you're choosing to cut 9 people who give direct contact instruction in a small group and whole class format to kids that need it, that will narrow our achievement gap. You can ask schools for data, we can give data. We have to allow our interventionists to do their best work in their small class groupings. And using the AOE guidelines as a baseline for class sizes in a district where our needs are this great is an error. And it's only going to make our achievement gap grow. We have too many needs. And crunching some numbers as a taxpayer, the difference between the highest and the lowest proposals last night was $47. That's 90 cents per week. That is so small. Please buy back those 9 positions. 90 cents a week. We can do that. I can do that. Taxpayers want our neediest learners to have the opportunity to get the best access they can from that starting fundamental point of math and reading. Give our little kids that. Give them that.
Good evening. I'm Christina Erickson. I'm a Ward 3 resident and a parent of a 2nd grader at the Sustainability Academy. And I'm not going to be nearly as articulate as the 2 past speakers, and I appreciate their thoughtful words. But I just come to reiterate the point of cutting the direct instruction and direct instructors to our youngest children and youngest students seems to be a huge mistake in the long run. And questions that I've heard and I have been unable to answer is, okay, if we have to make cuts, where else can we make cuts? And because we don't have a big picture of what the budget looks like on a line item, how do we know where are other opportunities, we the public? And so I ask, I guess it's a 2-part piece of sharing more information so we have a better understanding and can be better informed residents and better informed voters and engaged citizens, and we have all the information that we can get. But back to the interventionists, specifically the elementary school positions, please reconsider the funding for those, and there's got to be a way to make it work so that our youngest are not feeling the hardest impacts. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm here to support our 6 interventionists that are on the table. I'm here because I think we're on a slippery slope when we start talking about cutting $420,000 worth of interventionists. We've sort of seen this before in our history as a school board when we made the determination 4 years ago to cut $400,000 of paraeducators from the kindergarten classrooms. Since then, we've heard tales from parents and kindergarten teachers and older classroom teachers of the impact that has had on our students, and the impossibility of trying to put that kind of number back into a budget is very difficult, as we still have not been able to achieve that despite an outpouring of concern and request. So I think what we're looking at here is sort of the same idea. We're talking about removing $420,000 of interventionists from our school district. We had a plan presented last night that was very new, that people had a lot of questions about, that doesn't seem to be fully fleshed out. We don't know how many interventionists we'll really need to implement that plan. Those numbers haven't been crunched. I think it's short-sighted to remove 6 interventionists when we don't really know what we're looking at, and that we should keep those 6 interventionists fully funded at the level they are currently at, which is licensed teachers, until we know what our new plan will look like. If down the road we determine our new plan doesn't require that staffing, let's revisit it then. But we're putting the cart before the horse in cutting interventionists before the plan is in place and we know what our needs are. So I think it's the responsible duty to keep these 12 interventionists all in place for the betterment of our students, especially our youngest learners, and keeping the achievement gap, closing it, and doing what we need to do. So that's my take. Thank you.
Maggie Graham.
Where do I go? Right here? Yep. Sit down, stand up. Okay. Hey, I'm Maggie. This is my daughter, Apple. I've never even been to a school board meeting before, but I would like to say thank you for all the hard work that you guys do. It's really amazing that we have folks like you that care so much. I also feel underinformed on what is even happening, so I'll just talk about what I think, which is that it sounds like there's some issue with interventionists, and you guys have a crazy budget, and like we have to do a lot of cuts or something, and that there's some thought that a bunch of interventionists from elementary schools would be cut. I can't tell you how strongly I feel that that's a terrible idea and a terrible, terrible disservice to our kids. And then it sounds like I don't know anything about the golf and what's that, skiing thing, but it sounds like that was somehow thrown in for some reasons that I'm not clear about. Golf and skiing are not as important as my elementary school kids being able to read and do math. That's just true. Who cares about skiing if you can't even read or do math like that? I get that skiing's important. I know that it can like enrich people and things like that. My point is that those aren't even on the same platform to me. I brought my daughter because, I heard, a couple of people saying that it's hard to have kids come to this, and it's true. However, my daughter, Apple, she gave me permission to tell about this, but she's had the services of 2 interventionists, reading and math, and she told me that she would, if I asked her simple questions, she would answer. So you have worked with Mr. Fitz and Miss Mack at school, right?
Yeah.
What's that been like for you?
Well, they're very, very helpful, and yeah.
And do you think, well, whatever I say now just sounds like coaching, but in my parental experience, my daughter, actually I have 2 other kids, all 3 of them go to Sustainability Academy, so I have 3 children at Sustainability Academy. They all 3 have gotten different services. That means my time's up. All 3 of them have gotten different services on the whole spectrum. And I can't, I have the ability to come to meetings and write emails and do things because I have this privilege and I'm educated and all these other things. Many of the other people's parents who get the services that my kids get do not have that ability. So let me speak for all of them and say, do not take these services away. It's just absurd that that's even a thing. But I know your job is really hard and I don't understand half of it. So I do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Doug.
My name's Doug Brooks, and I have 2 children who attend Flynn School, and I'd like to thank the board for all of your hard work. I appreciate you all volunteering your time. You have an incredibly difficult job, and among the many responsibilities that you have, certainly allocating very scarce resources is one of them. So I'm here tonight to advocate to keep the reading and math interventionists as part of the school. I think that they're very important, and you know, they're a very important role. They're a very important role to my family. I have 2 kids again that go to Flynn. One of them has received services. She's made tremendous progress. Progress that I don't think would have been possible without the help of these interventionists. On her most recent assessment, she was considered grade level, which I'm very proud of her about. I'm very proud of the school, the teachers, and all the support, including the interventionists that helped her get there. And I don't think that she would have got there without such specialized support. So as the board continues to consider how to evaluate and allocate resources, I ask that the interventionists be considered a key role in our school and continue to be that key role. They play a very important role for the children that need it most. So I feel like losing interventionists at Flynn School and throughout the district would be a great disservice and a great cost to our children. And I think that they absolutely deserve their educational benefit, and us losing them as a resource would really hurt our community. Thank you.
Anyone else who's not signed up?
I'm going to turn over for board reflection. Is there anyone that would like to talk during board reflection? Commissioner Judson?
I would just like to remind people that we do have a line item budget on the website, and if it's difficult to find, I'd be glad to help you. Show you how to find it. But I do know that you can go to 2 meetings ago, and it's at the bottom of Superintendent Obang's presentation.
Commissioner Wick?
Could I just have clarification? Because I have not seen an FY19 line item budget. So I want to be clear with the public and with each of us that I have not seen it. But there is an FY18 comprehensive budget document that we put out about a year ago before we voted. I wasn't on the board then, but before the board voted on its budget.
Anyone else like to speak to a board reflection? Commissioner Curry?
I'll just say that thank you for coming, and we had a long meeting last night. My lack of reflections is not because I personally don't hear your concerns, and I did send out a long email to the PTO listserv, so if people have access to that, it's there.
If there's nobody else, I'll just expand a little bit on the line item budget, if you don't mind. No line item has been cut. Amounts have been reduced, but no line item has been cut between 18 and 19. Okay? So you can look at that line item, unless you care about the difference between a $900,000 item and a $700,000 item, and you can discern it against the other 600 different line items. It might not be worth it. But that information is right there, and it's as soon as we approve a budget, I think you do it within like 30 days or so, Nate.
Yeah,
the new budget book, because it has to go in and explain what we did and why we did it. So that FY19 budget book will get posted and be available. That 18 will always be available to you. But you certainly call any one of us and we can guide you through that to the website if you'd like to. Any other board reflections? All right, let me close it at this time and turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. I want to thank the board in advance for approving the budget and moving to the next step. I think that we've had quite a process, and I do want to thank the board because I know the board has had, this is a difficult challenge, and the board has consistently rose to many challenges we've had over the last year or last couple of years and have dealt with it judiciously as best as possible. And here's another opportunity to demonstrate your balance here. We've had a number of presentations, and we've talked about the ground level from the consultation with our staff and our community. And if we recall back, we had about $6 million worth of investments people were saying we should introduce. I would love to do that, but we know the reality of it is that we couldn't do that. We were able to work it down to about 1.7 million, and then from there, the board gave us instruction in terms of trying to find a balance and found proceeding sort of proposals that had a balance between reductions and trying to sustain the enhancements that are going to support us in terms of moving forward. You've had some data from the community in terms of soft and contextual information through emails and surveys. You've had some great public comments with some really good contextual stories around people's personal experiences. And one thing that I was actually really pleased to hear throughout the conversations were not only the people's personal effect, but also people using the language that we've introduced around closing the achievement gap and reducing disparities. That's becoming normalized in terms of people making the connections. We still haven't really clarified exactly what that means. For some people, I think, don't really understand that, but we'll have the opportunity to do that for us. So I was happy to see both staff and community members using that language, and that's something that we've been able to introduce. So that's good to see. When we last left you last night, we left with this last slide, and we did a lot of conversations, and the last decision now for the board is to decide on what level of tax impact that they feel that is appropriate to take to the taxpayers, and that the taxpayers would be able to afford and support. I do think we do need to get a presentation, a number that we feel can be passed, so we can start the implementation of the work that needs to be done for us. So with that, I will leave this screen up there for board members to look at the 4 different scenarios. And of course, you're welcome to have conversations about hybrids of those scenarios. And we're prepared to implement within that context whatever the board decides in terms of moving forward for FY19 school. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair Porter, to start the process.
Commissioner Harrington, anything?
Oh, sorry.
You don't have to give us a number, just your thoughts, whatever you want to say right now, tell you the truth. I think it's fair to say we all want to hear from each other.
I'm trying to figure out how to get out of our meeting what I want to get, which is the story we want to tell about what we're hoping to do with the budget. And so I don't know how to. Oh, I'm just trying to figure out, we need a story about what we are generally intending with the budget. And I am still struggling with how to figure out how to get that out of tonight's meeting, because that's not going to come out of having an opinion about the size of the budget itself.
Mr. Kirk, you want to say anything? You want to pass?
No, I'm good right now.
Want to get caught up? Commissioner Witt?
Thanks. I have in front of me the specific additions and the specific reductions, and I'm not sure how fruitful it would be, but we all have a right to our own opinions here. If we're going to go take the pencil, the straight edge, and start, saying, oh, Jeff Wick thinks we should not have this particular addition, for a number of reasons. I am in full support of keeping the interventionists and our pool of classroom teachers. So all told, where I'm at here is I'm ready to support what I believe needs to be supported, which is the spending that represents the 8.05. Thank you.
Commissioner McLaren?
I agree with Jeff. I mean, I'm my strong preference is for buying back all 9 positions and athletics. I am more than willing to have a conversation about what investments or enhancements are valuable in this current budget climate. But I think, in my mind, I can make create a compelling story around why that budget, the 8.05%, invests in our teachers in Tier 1 classroom instruction, which we know affects students most, and is fiscally responsible, given we already are investing in our teachers with a new contract, and we are retaining the most essential components of what we need to do to reduce the achievement gap. And the ed spending change that Nathan put up on the board, I think, is more than justifiable given where we're putting that money.
Thank you. Commissioner Barlow. Well, I've received a number of questions about the interventionist presentation we had from Director Phillips last night. And so I had just a general question. It seemed like that was more of a conceptual construct at this point, that 6 of the 12 interventionists, it would be allocated to the intervention, and the other, whatever number were bought back, would be perhaps doing one of the other tasks that was outlined. I think that they were...
There were 2 areas. So one is around behavior concerns. So we've had extensive feedback from our staff and districts that behavior challenges are an issue in working with children. So that would be one area. And the other area is around instructional capacity building. So those are the 2 areas we use staff to move forward to support that. In partnership with the interventions.
Isn't that's still like, there's a lot of detail to be worked out around that plan, and is it possible that some of those people might still remain in an interventionist role if they're in some of those 6 positions? Because I'm hearing that we want to buy back the 6 interventionist positions that are at risk of being reduced, and it sounds like even if we buy them back, they may not be deployed that way in the district. They may be used for other things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're going to keep the 6, but the other 6, we want to make sure we align a role that fits with our planning around closing the achievement gap and supporting social emotional challenges. Those are areas that we feel we need to address. The other piece is that currently right now we don't have those supports at the middle school level. So we'd be able to use those additional 6 if they were to not just support elementary, but also support middle, right? Which there's a gap there as well too. So we want that opportunity, and so if the board decides whatever level they decide, then we will allocate them appropriately to meet the all the schools, right?
The needs were intervention, math and literacy intervention at the middle school. You could conceive of a scenario where some of these interventions might be redeployed there. I guess what I'm sort of getting at is, it sounds like it's a plan, it's an idea really, but it hasn't really, there's no implementation. You'd work with building heads and others to implement that when the time came. So tonight we're really talking about a level of financial support that would help allow us to do what we need to do to best spend those resources. Because I knew last night it's difficult. I'm not going to go back through it because we've all talked about it at numerous meetings, but we're talking about really, if you take out the state portion, the difference between and luckily we have the surplus to help buy down some of this, but we're talking about like basically. Before the tax increase would be 7.81%. We have some surplus, and we're talking about at the highest and 8.05%. And I understand it's real dollars to taxpayers, but we also have to consider the quality of the schools. So I know that I'm in one of those 2 top boxes, and I'm not exactly sure which one just yet.
Can I just remind the board that I neglected to sort of emphasize that when we first did the first presentation, you see the recall that we did say that if we did nothing, don't touch anything, we would be at 7.81. And the board directed us to go back, right? Yes, yes. The board directed us to go. I wouldn't have come back if we would have voted that
We
night.
asked you to please give us
Right, to have some
some other scenarios, but I don't remember us asking you to cut this, Steve. None of us did.
If you look, check the minutes, I believe that the board, there was a range of opinions around the table, and there was a need for us to come back with some options. And we came back with the options, and we've given you the range of options. But we started from the 7.8 if we did nothing. And there wasn't consensus, otherwise there would have been a vote. I would have hoped there would have been a vote that night, and we could have ended the budget process. And then we've come back several times based upon requests, and now we've gotten these opportunities. So I'm hopeful that there's enough information now for people to make a decision on what's been presented.
So I would support, right now, based on what I know and based on everything we've talked about, I would support either 7.68 or 8.05 of the options presented.
Commissioner Judson?
I'm still very confused about how we would support our elementary students if we eliminated 6 instructional interventionists. And as Mark said, it's still a little vague, but at this point, I can't trust that vagueness and say I support cutting those positions. The other thing that I'm confused about right now is if we're focusing on K-3 in order to really minimize the academic achievement gap, then why would we talk about the possibility of taking some of these interventionists and put them in middle school? If we do nothing, as you were saying, the voters are still going to have to stomach a 7.18 or 7.8? 8. Oh, 7.81, right. Tax increase. The information that we got from that survey, which I thought was really helpful, if I looked at it, it was really pretty much 50-50. I would support an increase. I would support the 7.81.
7%.
The 7%, okay. I am in strong favor of keeping the interventionists, and if the curriculum coordinator and administrators feel that they can be used in a better way, then it's up to them to decide how those people can be used. If one of the elementary schools doesn't need it as much as Hunt, then that's up to the administrators to decide where that position would best be used. I am for the 8.05.
Commissioner Curry?
So where I am right now is that I certainly believe that you and your administration have the expertise to make these recommendations and establish effective strategies. I don't have that expertise. And so my misgivings are not about the merits of your recommendation. I think I said this last night. It's just about feeling like I don't have time to get all my questions answered, and that because the proposal was unrolled late in the process, for reasons I understand, but I don't have the time to get comfortable with it, and so my preference would be that it be on the table for this year as a comprehensive review that engages the building administrators and the staff in that review so that they understand why what is happening now does not seem effective, and that understanding is developed in the district. And so I would not want to see a situation where whatever we end up doing means that, interventionists are moved without staff having a really deep understanding of what's working, what's not working, and why things are being changed. So that's my overarching concern, regardless of how the numbers fall out. And I also, this construct doesn't work for me. I would have preferred to approach the budget with that baseline and the surplus, and then understand the reasoning for recommendations from an equity lens, because the takeaways I have from the information available to me is that, the BHS World Languages or EMS Makerspace or even the EMS electives are enhancing a middle school that has the highest outcomes of the entire district. And so I'm just not understanding, why those enhancements are being deposited there. I get the thing about the 60 electives, but we have 60 kids in the study hall, so I just need more rationale for these recommendations, and I'm not there. So because of that, I think I understand the class size issue and the pressures on the budget. Just strategically, because I'm not an expert in kind of these pedagogical issues, and you guys are, and I understand what you're trying to say, and because we just didn't have enough time, my preference is strategically just to ask the voters if they'll support an 8% budget. And if they won't, we'll have more time to discuss these, and we'll have more time to bring people along. But let's ask the voters and see if they will support our kids and our community, and a healthy community, and see if we can all get out there and make that happen. And if we can, I understand you still might make changes to the intervention program, but having those resources gives us all, I think, the margins we need to develop staff resources effectively, or give you the resources you need, I would say.
That's it? Really? Sure.
Do you want to pause and I'll think about some more?
Yeah. I better move fast, huh? Commissioner Orwell.
I too, for many of the reasons stated before, would go for the 8.05. I am, though, very concerned that those interventionists will not be doing intervention at 1 through 3, because in your slide yesterday, you told us that that was where you got the best bang for your buck. So I don't understand why we're not going to take some of those and put them at the middle school. I'm not saying the middle school doesn't need stuff, but we have $200,000 in there for support services, I thought. Do we not? In the enhancements, is there not $200,000?
For middle school, specifically?
Okay, so,
Specifically for middle school?
no, not specifically, but
Oh,
some of that I would think is going to go to the middle school, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah. So, and the other thing about the classes, I mean, I thought that what was on one of the other slides before was that 22 was the highest the AOE was putting for kids in first through third, or first and second. And you gave us on this slide that it's 23. And that's going over the amount that it was supposed to be. You said tops was 22.
It's not what that number means. It's saying taken on average across the whole district, what should the average class size be in that cohort? It's not a class size maximum.
Okay, but I assume that those teachers are at those schools because they have very, very high needs. Am I correct? Is that not the reason that they are in those 3 schools and that there are small classrooms? I'm asking you.
I'm just listening.
No, I'm asking. I would like an answer.
I'm trying to listen. I'm not sure what you're trying to get at, because if you're, we're trying to, no, I'm trying to understand so I can give you an appropriate response. I can agree with you, but I don't know if that's going to help you in making a decision. But I don't know what the detailed question that you're trying to get at in terms of.
Yeah, I have read plenty. I have spent the last 23 years in and around these schools. I know what it looks like in these buildings. And I know that in the very high SES buildings, there is a lot more personnel needed than what we have. And to hear that we're going to just take them and put them in a pool and they could get to go anywhere, when I assume the reason those teachers are extra in those schools and they have the low class size is because they need low class size to teach those kids. And I'm sorry, but you can't give me a study why we're doing this. You're giving me something that isn't flushed out and saying this is what we're doing. And I'm sorry, the only reason I am sitting at this table is because of kids, and mostly because of the poor kids I have worked with for the 24 years I have been here. I have tried to find places that were safe for them. I have tried to give them all the extra things after school and in the summer to educate and keep them going. It's not that I don't know education. I am a social pedagogic. I was taught in Germany. I am not just, as many would love to say, just a social worker who's working with kids. So I know pedagogic, and I know that I also have a nephew who who is the assistant principal of one of the KIPP schools in the South Bronx of New York, which is probably one of the poorest areas in this country. When I gave him this scenario, he just shook his head and said, Kathy, really? I mean, you need small classrooms and a lot of intervention at very early ages to get these kids coming out of really impoverished backgrounds to a place where they can learn. And so everything here is against what I know and have read and have learned is right. And I guess it worries me terribly that we're going to take these, I assume most everyone will go for 9, but then they could be doing all sorts of things instead of working with our neediest kids. And that really, truly bothers me.
So let me just assure you, I don't think we've ever said we're going to have additional staff just work with anyone. I think if you look back,
well, you said you were putting them in
several presentations ago, we talked about an equity index when we do the allocation. So those schools you're talking about that have the highest needs, they do get factored in terms of having those supports. Any additional staff we would have, we would look at where the needs are and allocate. Someone asked an example even yesterday, what would you do with those staff? I said, yeah, we have to look at it, and I wouldn't automatically put them back at this particular school. I would want the opportunity to hold them back and then be able to identify where the hot spots are, because principals come all the time and say, I have a challenge in this school, this, and I say, well, there's nothing I can do because I don't have anything. But to have that ability with those resources and say, yes, it needs to go here, and you can support what if it's a social, emotional, behavior, or an instructional challenge, then we can apply to that. We would never take an approach that we're just going to scatter it everywhere. I think we've been consistent in saying that we would definitely use an equity lens in terms of the allocation, so it wouldn't go anywhere, but we're looking at where the most needs are. I agree with what you're saying, Kathy. I'm not saying, oh, I don't think we should give to the most needy. That's what we've created the equity index for, and the conversations we would have with staff in terms of any sort of resources we have would say, okay, where is the needs? Why would we put them where the needs are? And right now we're talking about, there are 3 classes you're talking about. We've got many classes across the district. We had, and when Victor showed you the example yesterday, there were 11 opportunities that we could have reduced, and we went through and we said, those don't make sense because it'll be challenging for schools to implement that. Then we got down to 7. We said, okay, let's do these 3. Had I brought the 11 classrooms and said, these are the 11, you probably would have the same response. You'd say, we should be supporting those 11 classrooms, because there are other classrooms that have challenges as well too, but we have to do the work to kind of bring it down to a level that we can come to the board and explain where we're going. What you're talking about is something that happens on an annual basis, and it doesn't usually come to the board level. It only happens to come because it coincided with a budget timeline, and we said, oh, we're going to be able to make some savings because we have these, so we're sharing that with you. On a regular year, we'll make those adjustments based on enrollment. That happens. If there's more kids here, we need to have more students there. If there's less kids here, we need to reallocate the staffing. If there are needs in certain schools, we have an index in terms of identifying where the EL, IEPs there, so we can give those staffing.
health.
So we can apply, and that's what I think we're trying to reflect. If you look at slide number 7, some of the priorities we talked about is we wanted to maintain the classes but use the equity lens and also address social emotional supports. So that's not lost to us. We know, we hear from our staff that they have mental and traumatic challenges that sometimes they can't deal with before they can even get to the. So I want to kind of assure you, because I know you've said this a few times, and I'm just trying to understand, because I agree with you that we need to apply to the most needy, and I'm saying that any sort of distribution or reallocation we do with the resources, it's going to be based on need. Why wouldn't we do that? That's our goal, right? I hope that helps. We can talk.
Well,
We can talk
it still
some more.
doesn't help with the age range, but.
Right.
I'm 8.05.
Commissioner Kleeman.
Okay. I have a question about the interventionists. What I'm taking away is that in a lot of ways, the interventionists are going to be flexible, in the sense that they belong not to a single school. They won't be locked into one school that they're already at. They will be used where they're needed. And does that mean that they could be moved during the year if there's a hot spot, if something really crops up that needs more attention, like an emergency? I've seen different cohorts come through and have a huge impact.
Well, in an emergency, of course,
Well,
we
yeah,
respond to an emergency. But
Right.
no, I mean, we need some stability, and I think what you need to be clear on is the first 6 are going to be designated at.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's going to be a body there all the time. And then the other allocations, depending on what the board decides to do, then we'll have to determine the distribution of
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
So I've had different projects where you've had a resource that's shared between 2 schools, or shared between 3 schools, or 1 school. And sometimes that allocation is based on the size of a school, right? So a size of a school that's less than 200 has different needs than the size of a school is 400. So is it fair that they both get a whole body? Maybe the smaller school has really high needs. So, but we have to do that sort of analysis in terms of allocation. So if we have 4 bodies, we do that analysis. If we have 6 extra bodies, we do that analysis. If we have 10 extra bodies, we do that analysis, right? So that's what we have to kind of determine based on the need. And I think that is the best approach, to target where the need is and give the resource where the need is, right? People keep talking about equity, and what they're really talking about is equality. Everyone should get, no, that's not equity. You know, I may get 0 and Nate may get 5 because that's what he needs.
Oh, yeah.
Right? In terms of, so we have to apply that sort of lens in terms of how we resource allocate. We're accustomed to, okay, everyone gets 1, I didn't get 1, and when you dig a little deeper, you can see that everyone has a different demographic, different context, and even different capacity in terms of schools, in terms of the staff, where they are, right? In terms of what they need, right?
And I do know that in some schools, in particular classrooms, the intervention hasn't been as successful, probably from losing a full hour of time, of core teaching time. So I really love that this gives flexibility and puts that back into the system, as opposed to just going with what we've had in the places we've had them. So I guess that was my question, just about the level of flexibility. And I'm just going to throw this out there. It's not really, it's for future. I can save it for later because it's more about something I'd love to revisit creatively.
Yeah.
But I would support the 8.05. Although, if there's any way to get it to 7.9999, it would look a lot better. It'd be easier to sell. But I think we need. I have one more question, actually. So with the original budget scenario, we didn't have cuts in all of this.
No.
And that was closer to 9-something, right?
We had a lot of
can't
early
think.
scenarios. We had a scenario where we added the full slate of enhancements
Right.
and made no other offsetting reductions or
Right, and that was the one
reallocations, and
that
that
was
was
closer to
approaching
10.
10.
Okay.
Right, yep.
All right.
With the use of the surplus to buy it down.
Okay. Yeah. And the fact that we can do something reasonably similar and that you found so many ways to save money is amazing. To get it down to 8.05 from the 10. So thank you.
Commissioner Serino.
Yes. So a couple of things. One is I don't have as much perhaps anxiety about your discussion around allocating interventionist as others do. A lot of what I study is around economic development, and the places that are the most successful are the ones that deal with a changing dynamic environment by being flexible. And what I understood from the presentations was that you have a data-driven approach to being flexible and using resources well, rather than simply repeating the way that we do things. And I think that that's necessary for us to be convinced of as a board, because we have to make the case to taxpayers that we're not wasting money in the school district. And so I appreciate that, and I think it sets us apart from where we were 3 or 4 years ago, in which it was really impossible even to get a rationale for various decisions and so forth. So I feel comfortable with that. I did a little bit of math here, checked it with Nate. I haven't fully checked it with him, but he'll correct me if I'm wrong. So just to look at the scenario of 7.68%. So that spending increase of $294,000 and $236 is a 0.37% increase in our budget. So it's 1/3 of 1%. The next scenario is a 0.67% increase in our budget. And so I'll just say to you that I have had a lot of mail about holding the line on the budget. I've seen the online stuff. I'm deeply concerned about people on fixed incomes and so forth, but I do think that if we go with either of the last two scenarios, that we can make the case as a board that we have increased our spending by less than 1%. And if this is a really hard, place to be, in a variety of reasons, because it's literally between being a rock and a hard place. But we have committed ourselves, and it's very clear that the board is at least, I think, virtually unanimous on this, and it's aligned with the administration and the staff and the community, that we need to address the achievement gap, and we have high socio-emotional needs, not just amongst low-income kids, but amongst all families. And so I have to say that I would be comfortable with either of the last two budgets. I, like Commissioner Kleeman, it would be easier to find a way to keep that slightly under 8%, but I would be willing to go there and fight for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Cook. Did I miss anybody else before I go around? Okay, so I just want to, I know the mention was on the $504,000, somebody mentioned the $504,000 increase. That only exists because we're cutting $550,000 out of the back office.
What?
Out of the.
Central office.
Right, well, no, not only central office, right? So it's non-teaching positions are going to get cut $550,000 to make that happen. That's the painter that we know, the grounds foreman's not going to be there. I know there was talk about not doing the makerspace, but at the same time, in the same year, we're going to eliminate the Senior Director of Infrastructure and Technology. Right? So we're not going to be on a lot of things that we wanted to do, a lot of things we've been thinking about in the last couple of years are going to take a break. Right? But people are losing jobs. So it's a very real thing. These are people that feed the family. Unfortunately, except for the senior director and probably the grounds foreman, these are probably some of the least expensive jobs we have. All right, $550,000 is equated with those. Half of that is equated to those positions I mentioned, including the principal substitute, which we're not going to have. Right, the rest of it, $275,000, is under additional operational budget reductions. Right, it's not hitting people making $70,000 a year. That's hitting people making $30,000 a year. All right? So make sure you put a humankind. These people have been said, we're up to $1.15 million that we've cut in non-teachers' positions in the last 3 years. This is a big deal. So when you call in and you can't get anybody, you know why. Right? And if Nate's a little slow on the draw and answering some budget questions or coming up with something, you know why. Right? Because we've cut a lot out of that. Right? So I'd like to propose something else on numbers, just because I want to go back to the original intention of the interventionist, which was grades 1 through 3, which the purpose is to make there be a proficiency in grade 3. Right? Why? Because we don't teach reading after that. All right? And that's like such a telltale age to determine the future from these kids, right? But because we, as Stephanie mentioned yesterday, we didn't have the guidance and the tools. I remind everybody that she says she can be able to get out of her budget to do this right, so it leaked over into 4 or 5. Right? Are they needed in 4 or 5? Sure am. 6, 7, 8, 9? Sure am. We all know this, right? But the original intention was 1, 2, and 3. If we're getting services to 4 and 5 with 12, all right, and by the loosest percentage you could come up with is 40% of the teachers are servicing 4th and 5th grade, and now you only want to serve K through 3. There's about, I'll round down to 4. There's 4 interventionists that are working through an effort up on grades 4, 5, right? Hold on a second. If you then took the teachers, and actually, Kathy, I want to ask you a very pointed question. The 15 student classes and those things, isn't that just the luck of the draw that that's the cohort coming through? Yeah. So that's not because we said we only need to have 15 students in these classes. That's if those students had 20 students, I'm sorry, not even. If they had 18 student classes right now, we wouldn't be having this conversation about that because you wouldn't be offering to cover.
Absolutely.
Right? So, okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood that because I didn't think you would do that. Right? What I'm thinking is that if the greater need is specialized, and you already said that you're going to take those classes, I think it was to 19 if I remember right. It was like a 19 average or something like that. It was going to be across that cohort. I think so, or whatever it is. Take those 3 and add them to the pool of whatever these new roles are. All right? So you bring out 4 from there because now you're only going to be concentrating on 1 through 3 from the interventionist concept. All right? Then you bring in the 3 on the other end that are now freed up for the teacher side of things, and you keep them. You just re-roll them to something else. And all we're going to be looking at is a net loss of 4. Right? And the pool is actually much bigger than that. When you look at all the teachers that this is coming, the pool is much bigger across the schools, as we're talking like that. When you talk about interventionists, when you talk about 12, you're talking about across all schools. I'm sorry, all the 6 schools. And same thing if you talked about 5th grade or 4th grade or 1st or 2nd or 3rd, you have to look across that same cohort across all those schools. Right? So that would be my suggestion, is we look at just putting a hat on to try to normalize the number, go back to what the original intention of the interventionists were, address the need in those 3 schools just to right size those classes. And we can have a reduction of 4 that better matches some of the cuts that the central office and so on have been taking. So it equalizes the burden of what this is doing. Right? I think there's a fairness that occurs there. Right? We certainly as taxpayers are going to suffer, not even through our choices, right? But we're going to suffer, and this is certainly going to stop some things from happening in my life because of this. So now we just have to say, how do we share that burden most appropriately? And so that's what I would suggest on that. And that's all I have. Commissioner Seguin, Commissioner Hall.
I mean, if you're talking that all these teachers, these interventionists are that some of them are at 4 and 5. I mean, we've got principals here from many of these schools, or at least 2 of them I see. Can we not ask them where those interventionists in their schools are? Because I would bet that in most of these schools, it's not like all of them, half of them are being used at 4 or 5.
Yeah, I didn't say that.
Well, you did, because you were going to take half of them away.
No, that's not what I did. Commissioner Seguino?
I'm gonna, if I need to phrase this differently, please let me know, but I understand from asking Finance Director Lavery that in order to get the far right column under 8%, $35,000 would need to be cut. And what I would like to propose is that we do that we invite the superintendent with his staff to make the decision about where that $35,000 is cut. That keeps all of the 9 position and athletics and gets it below 8%. And if you would like me to frame that as a motion, I'm happy to do that.
Commissioner Commissioner Wick. Wick, McLaren, Barlow, Harrington.
I think the interventionist discussion is a good one. I think we know not what we think here. I do not think we know what we're talking about, and I personally, not tonight, but I do think it's important enough that before we decide on the plan, or before the superintendent decides on the plan that was presented by Stephanie Phillips and Victor Prusak last night, that this is important enough that we hear some testimony from each of the building principals as to how how these folks are used and what they perceive the value to be. I don't think it's productive to do tonight at all. So I just think it doesn't add to our conversation for us to start speculating about any of this. I think it's half-baked. I think this needs to be better thought through, and so I think we can all agree on a number, I suspect, for the size of the budget, which is why we're here tonight. But I don't see any value in fighting about the role of the interventionists at the board level right now.
Commissioner McLaren.
I would agree that I don't see the value in continuing to have this conversation. As I would agree with Commissioner Barlow that what we're really trying to decide is the number of FTE buyback at this point that it's gonna end up in our budget. So that's the conversation I think we should be having specifically tonight. A question for the chairman: does our motion need to be the specific ballot language?
We need to give him a number that he then can plug into the ballot language.
Okay, but we don't, the motion won't be the specific ballot language, including.
It has to be. It should be the ballot.
It should, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So if we do make a motion to recommend the administration decides where to cut that number, we would have to do that quite quickly and I think return to vote on specific ballot language. So just as a point of clarification, which is not something I'm unwilling to do. I just wanted to put that out there. But I appreciate Commissioner Seguino's math, and I was doing some back of the envelope math myself over here around the 8.05% item, which that to be clear, that number won't appear on a ballot. The numbers, and I was doing the math on the numbers that would appear on the ballot, which would be our total budget, which doesn't necessarily affect tax rates, because we're really talking about the general fund budget that is affecting tax rates. And our per pupil equalized spending, which is a function of our education spending divided by our equalized pupil count. Is that right, Commissioner Nathan? Right?
Correct.
And so our previous year's per pupil equalized spending was $15,066.96. The 8.05, the 9 positions in athletics buyback would lead to rough math, so this might not be precise, but I think it's close. A per pupil spending rate of $15,000, $120.34. That's a per pupil spending change of $53.38, which is 0.35% increase. So, in my mind, that is achieving the goals that have been set at the state level, which is keeping our education spending within the growth rate of the state of Vermont, which is up over 1%. I don't know what the percentage actually is, 1.52. And being quite responsible with how we're using our resources. And so I'm more than comfortable making that argument to our community that we've managed to invest in our teachers, maintain Tier 1 classroom instruction, and still keep our growth rate well below what has been suggested at the state level. And I'm more than open to having a conversation to keep the total percentage under 8%. But I think it's important to know that when our voters look at this ballot, they'll see a per pupil spending number that went up by $53 and a sentence that says this projected spending per equalized pupil is 0.35% higher than for the current year. I think voters will support that. I think that's a responsible board and a responsible administration taking a serious look at how we use our resources. And we know that the remainder of that percentage increase in terms of overall tax rates is out of our control.
Commissioner Barlow. I thought Commissioner Harrington was going. Okay, I'll go.
I can make it up.
So I feel I agree with Ryan, but I also believe that we do have to take the tax rate into account because people will be talking about the tax rate for the next bunch of weeks leading up to town meeting day. So even if it's not on the ballot, it's something that will be out in the community and something we have to be mindful of. And I also agree that we should try to get it down below 8%, or at just around 8%. I think that there's some benefit in doing that, and we wouldn't have to come back to do that. We could do that and incorporate it into language tonight that we'd be voting on. Is that true? Mm-hmm. Oh.
Stephanie has a motion.
Okay, so is that true? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Harrington.
I agree with Commissioner McLaren that I think I have been quite responsible in attempting to contain costs and be focused on the clearly articulated mission that we've been also working with the community on articulating. I think no matter how much no matter how much of the budget cuts have been focused in the past several years in non-teacher places or non-direct instruction places, it has not stopped people from increasingly emailing to say, don't cut this, cut from the central office instead. So no matter how much money has been cut from the central office, people continue to say that's the place where more cuts should be taken from. So we have a narrative problem in kind of explaining that. I spent a lot of time today contrasting our discussion about closing the achievement gap with some of the discussion and the rollout of the reshaping of the English language program, which managed to happen outside the context of a budget outside of a fraught budget. We were able to hear from Miriam over time and from the superintendent about the different models that attracted attention. We were able to see how that centrally directed resource and expertise was put into action in order to meet the needs that had been previously articulated by staff and parents and students inside the district, and made some major changes to how that program was shaped and delivered, which is working great. And my hope would be that in rolling out how to address the achievement gap, the same things could be true. But I took from the superintendent's comments last night that in part because of these external financial constraints that are putting so much pressure on the taxes, we're kind of a year ahead perhaps of where he would have liked to be. And I'm struggling with how to think about that. I totally agree. I'm not sure the board ever needs to be having a conversation really about the appropriate role of interventionists, because we are not I think if the district needs an external body to advise it, it should assemble one of people who are actually qualified in K-12 education to do that. I do not think we are that body. But I feel like we are ahead of ourselves in getting on the same page, either as a board about what's going on, how to explain this to parents, the conversation about please don't cut the interventionists who are clearly doing such valuable work with people with such expertise and dedication and passion. What is lost is the other conversation that we heard last night about the desire to increase core instruction time in the elementary schools, and that is not getting discussed at all. I mean, so I think we are not having the right kind of conversation, and I'm worried that moving to one of the two left columns would just create such instability, it would make it impossible to have that conversation. The D&E committee is planning on having a public event to roll out, talking with the public about the achievement gap. So like if this external pressures were not happening, I think we might be starting on a path where a year from now, academic and social emotional support in the elementary schools might look different, but it would have been more of an organic process where everybody was moving along. And I am both concerned about the budget failing, and I'm concerned about stability. And I can see instability being caused by reducing some of these positions when we're not on the same page about how and why and what we're doing collectively as a community. But I can also see an enormous amount of instability introduced if the budget fails, and I am deeply, deeply worried about that. I am as willing as anybody to go out and argue for the need for investment in schools, but I am deeply worried that if the budget fails, it's going to have a ton of negative repercussions at a moment where we need to be rebuilding. So,
Mr. Kurt. So I just have a couple of questions, and I hope that they're really simple. But am I to understand, and I've missed some meetings, so I've had some personal things I've had to deal with. So we're talking about a less than 1% increase over our budget. Okay, so I mean, if the district has been keeping, I'm just trying to rationalize everything for everybody, but if the district's been keeping a 2% budget increase in mind thereabouts for the last 4 years, and we're doing less than that again this year, I understand the tax implication because of the state of Vermont, but unfortunately, that's something we don't have control over. I think we need to think that, I know we need to think about the tax implication, but we also have to think about the realistics of this, and that if we're having a less than 1% tax budget increase, that the district is doing the right thing. I know it's unfortunate that we could have an 8% increase, or hopefully less than that. It's unfortunate that our legislative body hasn't done their job very well. It's unfortunate that we're not all sitting in those offices having this same exact discussion. It's unfortunate that we're not all, when we go to the polls this year, thinking about that when we elect our legislative body again. I just want to say the district has done a pretty good job over the years that I've been on the board at maintaining spending with Howard Smith and under the leadership of Yao and Howard Smith. We've maintained a low budget increase. I don't like this at all, no matter what. I don't like the 6.92, to be perfectly honest. I don't want my taxes to go up $600 or $300 or whatever they go up. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think it's the district's fault if we actually end up at 8%. I don't want to, but I don't know how else to fight it. I mean, if we're keeping our budget increase at less than 1%, I think that's the important thing. I am not the guy who wants to ever spend money, and I want to find a way to cut it. But I'm going to tell you, I think the district has done a good job at trying to maintain costs. Sorry, it's probably not what you expected me to say, but it's the facts. I mean, I have to go with the facts on this. You know, I've missed a lot of meetings. I've been sitting here absorbing. I hate to say it. I don't want this. Okay, I just need to figure out. I'm not trying to sell it to anybody either. I just need to, it's rational. I mean, we're doing the job that we've been asked to do.
Sell it to the taxpayers.
I think we just need to get David.
Yeah, I think, can we videotape?
Yeah.
They just did.
That's our clip. That's our clip.
So I know you're going to make a motion on this, so let me just go ahead and say something. I'm probably not going to approve this, and I'll tell you why. Nobody here at this table can tell me this works, right? Any of this, right? The data's flat. All the data that I read says that we're not doing the right things. I'm not saying that we're not working hard, and I'm not saying that the people aren't really feeling that they're doing the best they can to close this achievement gap. But I'm not seeing it happen. I'm seeing a shift, right? All of a sudden, the boys start to increase and the girls come down. So most recently this year, we don't see the test scores improving. We don't. And you know what? This is such a long-standing thing. This isn't something that just is our tenure for the last 4 years. This is decades and decades and decades that we've been trying to battle this. And what we're doing is not working. And I'm tired of just saying that number of bodies is good and that dollar number is good because I'm stuck with what I got. But instead, I think we fundamentally need to change the way we administer education. I think we need to do something very, very I don't know what that is, but I'm willing to support it. If he was willing, if I saw something here that was the big rock, right? It'd be a different story. I don't see it. I see everybody, most of you willing to say, let's just keep things the same. And I can't do that. So that's the only reason. Nothing against you guys. I see all your reasoning behind things. I really do. But my feeling is that this doesn't go that extra step that we needed. I don't want to wait another year for it to happen. So that's just me. Commissioner Seguino.
Commissioner Porter, I'd like to make a motion and then have an opportunity to discuss it after.
After a second.
Okay.
Do you make the motion?
So I move that the board put forth a budget that reflects a equalized pupil spending of $15,111.81.
And I second that.
This amount.
Discussion?
Yes. This amount reflects a 7.9% increase in the budget. It requires, therefore, that the superintendent and his team would find $35,000 over the year to cut, keeping the percentage increase under 8%. And there are several reasons for this. One is that what Commissioner Kirk just alluded to is that the district has worked hard to restrain spending. And number two, that the resources that are being added this year are done in a really thoughtful way, according to a strategic plan. And number three, we have set up ourselves as a board, a mechanism to monitor progress in the areas that have been identified, and the superintendent's team has, I think, a robust data-driven method to assess whether in fact the decisions that he and his team have made about allocation are working. And finally, it is with great regret that I put forth a motion that increases taxes, especially on the vulnerable, but I think that the benefits outweigh the cost in terms of children, and needs have risen in recent years to an extent that I think we no longer can afford to cut spending in ways that influence the resources that we have to allocate to children.
Further discussion? Commissioner Wick?
Yeah, thanks.
That's good.
Commissioner Seguino and Finance Director Lavery, I just want to make sure that the number, and Nate, maybe you can confirm this, that the number Stephanie put forward in fact represents the rightmost column minus $35,000 of miscellaneous cuts over the FY19 that we can dial here and there perhaps. Is that the case?
Right, yes. So that number is the rightmost column.
Rightmost.
Which includes the positions that we've talked about, and it just represents a difference from that scenario of the $35,000. So the result of that is equalized spending per pupil of $15,111.81, which, barring any change to the other variables, and I should just caution folks right now to know, legislatively there could be some action. We don't know what's in store. We just heard the governor's budget address. But under the information we know today, that would result in a tax rate increase of 7.99%. As folks have noted, of that 7.99%, only 0.8 percentage point are due to the spending changes that you've made. The rest of that is due to the other variables that go into generating the tax rate.
Just to follow up, if I may, in the event the state changes certain variables, I want to make sure we're stating this in the right way, that we don't have any unintended consequences of, don't we also have to, are we going to have tonight the language that's going to go on the ballot with the total spend number, the 3 inputs that you showed us last night?
I could probably come up with that tonight with a few minutes, but the key number, the reason that I suggest writing that way, is that education spending for equalized pupil. That's of the 3 pieces of information that are on the ballot, that's the one that really drives the tax rate.
Okay, because I just want to be very clear that what we're approving, I'm with Commissioner Seguino on this, but I want to make sure there aren't any unintended consequences of stating it in a particular way.
No, so it's the second figure there, the one that is just a hypothetical 15,000 figure. So typically what would happen if there is a legislative change, it's not going to change how much we are spending from the education fund per equalized pupil. What it would change is essentially the cost to the community of that spending level. So if they, for example, come up with a lot of money to add to the education fund in order to reduce the property tax burden, that won't change our spending level. It will just reduce the burden on taxpayers.
Okay.
So I think this is the right way to state the board's intent if it passes. And again, that's what we would put on the ballot. And it's not unusual for what goes on the ballot and our estimates of the tax impact to change after the ballot's been printed, after the people have voted. That's just the legislative process that sometimes doesn't end until June or whenever it ended last year after that. So I feel like this is the right way to do it.
Thank you.
It pleases the board.
Thank you, I appreciate that, Nate.
Yeah, Commissioner Harrington.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. So, one of the things I've been also fretting a little bit is that in our completely understandable resistance and questions about why was there this proposal to reduce interventionists when we have this commitment to closing the achievement gap, I have been concerned that we were undermining an important commitment that we had made which is to ask the superintendent to lead a systemic approach to having the entire district move together towards one goal. And last week especially, I thought I heard perhaps a bit of resistance back from you, kind of like, well, if you want systemic change and you don't want to spend a lot more money, we need to do things a little bit differently. But it seems like with this approach, now we get to do everything, right? So we're not undermining some of the ways you've been thinking about leading a systemic review, and so providing supports for the socio-behavioral, socio-emotional needs that we've heard so much about from teachers and parents and students over the past couple of years of public comment. So we're still getting to address those things, and we're retaining for this year those other positions that have already been doing valuable work. So perhaps my vision of creating this systemic change and a common understanding of how that change is working can still unfold. So like where everyone is getting what they want. Is that correct?
Everyone wins, yeah.
Yes, okay.
So yeah, you're absolutely correct that this does put us on track in terms of continuing the systemic sort of coherent vision that we have in terms of making a change, but at the same time retaining resources that we can allocate where needed to support that change, right? I say everyone wins. The only thing that, of course, if it wasn't for the state variables, we would have a low impact. But barring that, it would give us the resources we need to continue down the pathway and to have the kind of conversations we need to have with our staff to ensure that the resources are allocated in the right spaces, right places.
So I just would like to thank you, Commissioner Seguino, for making the motion, and thank you, Commissioner Kirk, for your perceptive comments. And I actually, Jeff, thank you for this budget tool. This is super. I believe we can get the tax rate down a little farther. And I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we use only $1 million of the surplus and leave $100,000 to be not put into the budget on the condition that it doesn't affect instruction, because I see an opportunity with the SURE settlement is going to bring money to the city, and some of that is designated for the schools, and I think that's a great place to go for the makerspace. I'm not sure we have the appetite for dual language program is a nice to have, but I think something like that could be grant funded. And then the BH World language, I never understood that. We have the best language curriculum in the county for high school languages, so I just didn't get that, like why we're enhancing that again. Yes?
Just to interject, to maybe help you a little bit, because you specifically talked about the surplus. If we don't use the surplus, there are other actions we'll have to take.
Oh, right, okay, sorry.
Right?
I'll change my friendly amendment to actually, total reductions 817, not 717,000. So the other 100,000 on the condition they come from non-instructional uses that lend themselves well to grants that are going to be readily available in a legal settlement with the city. That would be half of it. The other half, I think, are feasible. So this would get the tax rate if your tool is working for me.
Let me get a second on that, and then we can discuss your
friendly amendment.
motion within a motion.
I'm sorry, can't accept it.
Okay.
You're talking about the original motion, am I correct?
So I'm just going to keep talking if you want to accept my friendly amendment.
Well, you can
No,
move,
proceed.
you can
The
move
friendly-
to
I'm
amend
removing.
it, and then we have to vote.
Yeah.
But you can move to amend the amendment.
Yeah.
Then we'll all.
It doesn't
I'm
matter
just
what-
withdrawing it.
Okay.
I'm just withdrawing the friendly amendment, and I'll say that if we reduce the budget by 817,000, the tax rate would be 7.86, and the condition would be that that does not come out of instruction. So there's an opportunity to get it down further.
Commissioner Kleeman.
I really disagree with Commissioner Curry on this one, mainly because, and I'm not crazy about the makerspace, but my understanding, and the language program, my understanding is that we have a lot of support within the community And portions of that, larger portions than we know, are actually coming from the community. And I think it's important to build those relationships and keep those relationships. And I don't think, I mean, when Superintendent O'Bang came to us, he gave us a reasonable budget that he had spent time thinking about which investments will work now. And I'm going to trust him on that. I don't think we can.
I don't know if you heard that she withdrew that. So
No, but she's still,
No.
I think she's going to make an amendment.
Just so you know that she
Okay,
withdrew
well,
it,
yeah,
right, so-
but, so you're not going to make
No.
another amendment?
What the? Where did that come
has a picture.
I withdrew the amendment.
Yeah, but they were saying you could make an amendment.
No.
Okay, that's fine, but I think we should not go there then.
Does anyone else have anything?
Can I just add something? So the only thing I would add is that I'm not sure, Superintendent O'Bang, did you know that SURES is going to give the city money specifically designated for the schools? That's part of the legal settlement?
No, I wasn't aware of
If you had known that, would you have attempted to, project that into the budget?
I'm not sure. I have to do the details. I mean, I just find about it now, so I'd have to kind of review that.
Sure, I mean, there is, as part of the SURES' final bid, there was a $50,000 sum for, I don't remember the specific language that they intended for adult and adult education and student education around technology. My personal opinion is that is, while it is we expect it to be in the final purchase agreement, which I don't know exists yet. I would have a hard time planning on exactly what that looks like. It'd be a hard thing to plan around, I guess. And my strong hope as the liaison to the city, my plan is to advocate strongly for those monies to come directly to the district as the best place and most obvious place to do that education. But I wouldn't bet my life on it right now, and so I would have a hard time planning on it in this budget year.
Commissioner Butler? Just to build on what Commissioner McLaren said, insofar as we did receive money from Shores and received additional monies from the city, because I know they're still working on trying to vet proposals through AOE to help us out a little bit. That money, if it weren't part of this budget and was when we didn't need additional funds this year, it would become a surplus that we could use next year and apply, because we still have, even though we're applying the surplus this year, that's one-time money that we'll have to make up next year without a surplus of equal size. So I would say that the monies that come from Shores would be used for that.
Just a quick comment on that too. I wasn't aware when that agreement was made, but the communication I haven't received any communication that we're getting any direct dollars or a check or anything like that. So I wouldn't want to bank on that until someone actually said you're getting 25,000 of that 50,000. We'd be speculating. I know it's been challenging trying to get dollars that we believe belongs to us in other arenas, and I wouldn't be 100% confident that we'll get all 50,000 or what portion of that. So it would be a bit speculative if we did it at this point.
Anyone else? It would still become from private enterprise, and we'd have to look at it if we got double hit on that thing, right? So go back to the old ways
It's a
we looked at
grant.
it. We thought that in a lot of other things too, you get hit, right? Anything else?
Call the question.
All those in favor of the motion for a budget resulting in an education spend of $15,111.81. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against? Nay. So myself and Commissioner Kirk, Susan Marie? Did you vote? Oh, I didn't hear you. Okay, I'm sorry. Myself and Commissioner Kirk says no. Right, we have a budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to let people be aware, we will have on the board website as well as board docs the revised budget presentation with the reflected accurate numbers. For, yeah, with, so we'll have that, and we'll send that directly to you as well, too. Okay? Thank you.
To adjourn. So, you had your chair statement.
I'm sorry.
Chairman's statement still?
Oh, but chairman's statement, yeah, I'm gonna do that now.
Oh.
Do you know those aren't the correct numbers?
I just cover the meetings.
No, that the numbers, you were taking a picture of that those aren't the correct numbers.
I just cover the meetings. Whatever you put on the board, I photograph it.
Ah.
So I'm gonna do, if you'd all just stay for a second, let me just
No, I know.
Let me just go through the last item on the amended agenda, okay? So, this has nothing to do with the budget, right? It's just me to you guys, right? Mr. Squino? What? I gave you a motion and everything, right? So, fellow commissioners, I admire each of you for your active and vocal resistance to those that wish to bring harm to the district and Burlington community. There are some in the community wishing that the school board was more compliant to their entitled wishes, yet this board consistently stands firmly against retreating from its values and that which has made the community strong. We now see employees of sister school districts, former teachers, and spouses of current employees who own their retirement or salary at the Vermont NEA running for a position on the school board. Community's past experience has shown that this conflict of interest leads to unfettered budgets and higher labor costs and is ripe for the community taxpayer and children to pay that price. It has taken us 4 years to recover from past financial ineptitude, 4 years of restructuring to live within our means, 4 years of across-the-district sacrifices that have led to the stability we currently enjoy. However, this community's security is once again at risk. We also face a very real threat from those not holding the same values as many of us do. Recently, we discussed and approved the superintendent's fiscal year 19 goals of hiring teachers of color and improving the district climate. Through a front porch forum, one candidate questioned the poor timing of this discussion given our current financial timing. I question whether this is poor timing. Is there a better time to discuss the need to hire teachers of color than at the budget formulation meetings when funding is discussed? I understand the writer was concerned about the potential $2,500 bonus to the superintendent we'll earn a year from now when these goals are met, but being such a small and distant amount, this is blatant prejudice by not wanting dollars to go where this community needs them in order to provide academic and social mentors to some of our most vulnerable students. This past summer, I was invited to Commissioner Wick's house to talk. While talking on his front lawn, Commissioner Wick said to me that I understand the need to hire more teachers of color, but have we gone too far in hiring district leadership of color? While each of you can wrestle with your feelings about this, as I have, it is evident to me that Commissioner Wick's recent votes to not approve a 3-year contract for the superintendent nor the superintendent's annual goals, including hiring more teachers of color, means he is transforming his views into dangerous, actionable items. These actions are not for us as a board to correct, but the constituents of Wards 5 and 6 to decide if this is how they wish to be represented. In the meantime, and as a solidified board, we must act to silence and overcome these voices. I know some of you will ask why I did not bring this sooner. In witnessing what I saw on Commissioner Wick's front lawn that day, I did not know then that it would grow by using the power of the vote. This is now shown to be true. All of the wards are up for re-election this year, and while I expect many challenges to come forward with a single goal of listening and improving the community and fighting for an equitable education for all students, I know most of you have already proven yourself to fight for these children needing the most support to succeed in life. Children of color, poverty, special needs, and English language learners, to name a few, all deserve to live a life of happiness and hope. They demand this board to do everything it can provide that while facing them down, those who care less for the community welfare and only for themselves. It is with sadness in my heart that I will not be running for the school board again. Personal business as well as my new bride are making it increasingly difficult to dedicate the time necessary to support over 50 meetings a year. Thank you.
I think I have a right to speak to the score settling, which is completely inaccurate, Mr. Porter. And I'll leave it at that right now, but I'm shocked at the way you've distorted our conversation and taken a personal attack at me. But you have every right to speak. It's a free country.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Can I have a motion to